Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I want to talk about the spread of slavery. Um, Common topic. A lot of people deal with it. I don't think your book deals with it in quite the same way I do. That's why I'm adding this section, just as I added the section on the Merrimack or the Grand Tour. These little pieces that didn't quite fit into the narrative you're getting. Hopefully, to give you some more depth. So here we go. First of all, just like in the last two videos, I need you to go open a section, a PDF slash PowerPoint. It is sitting there. It is called Spread of Slavery MR. It is in this week's section. So go open that. I'll give you a minute. Go open now. Put me to the side. Go. This one really makes no sense without it. Okay, got it. Great. All right. Here's the deal. Um, Look at those for a couple minutes. In fact, pause me, look at them. There's a couple maps and a couple charts, so take a look at them. I'm waiting. Okay, you back? All right, you've looked at them. This is what I want to talk about. Because when we look at that first chart, we see the development of cotton. We see how cotton becomes more and 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 more burden to the south. In the country, in that last graph, the pie graph, you see that 60%, almost 60% of the entire exports of the United States of America is cotton. 60%. That's insane. That is huge. That boggles the mind. That one product could be that important, could be that valuable. But it was. And what you'll get in the South is this mindset that we tend to call King Cotton. And I know your book addresses this, but it shouldn't be overlooked. This mindset that you have the import that everybody depends on, the major source of income from other countries. You also have the product that the North, those textile mills, need more than anything else. These people get a feeling that cotton and that therefore the Southern culture is the prototype that everyone should follow. You can read more about that. That's going to come back with us a little more into as we're approaching the Civil War. But it is that separate mindset. All right. But look to the next graph. What we're going to find is that there was kind of probably a net reduction in slavery. The many slaves were getting freed because they had skills. They were able to buy their freedom. Some people were freeing their slaves. The North was abolishing slavery from 1790s to about 1820s. But you see, once cotton production begins, once the cotton gin really takes off, and of course the cotton gin was an easy invention that everybody capitalized on, slavery is going to rise right along with it. So an institution that was probably slowly on its way out over the next 30 years is now going to thrive. And if you look at the very last map, you can see that kind of yellow color where people are settling. That's the area we call the Black Belt. It's literally, and I know around here we've got what we call sandy loam. You pull it up, it's kind of brownish or beigeish. You go down there and you scoop up the soil, and it's this thick black soil. It is so rich. It is so good for growing cotton. Maybe some of the best in the world. Anyways, this is where they're going, and they're going to expand through this entire area. Look at that first map, 1790 to 1820. Do you notice any changes? I know you can't answer me, but yeah, you see slavery moving away from the North. It expands a little in the South. In Virginia, it kind of breaks up. You get some less in Virginia. But in the North, it really disappears. The question you got to ask yourself is, with all those slavery being abolished, what happens to all the slaves? Because we have this idea, oh, the North, like Connecticut, freed their slaves. Yes! We forget one aspect. They gave their citizens 5 years, between 3 and 5 years, depending on the state, to gradually abolish slavery. Why did they do that? Very simply, they did that so these people would have time to sell off their slaves at the best profit. Nobody abolished slavery outright. No, zero, okay, maybe two, slaves were freed when the North started abolishing slavery. They gave all of them time, all the slave owners in the North, time to sell their slaves south, literally down the river. That's where we get the phrase. Um, so, but now take a look at 1820 to 1860, that last map. You'll notice some changes going on there too. We saw 1790 to 1820 that Virginia had actually kind of decreased the amount of slavery. Tobacco wasn't on the rise, there were more people, etc., to work. But then, from 1820 to 1860, we see a consolidation of slaves in Virginia. Well, there's a reason for this, and it's not that they're producing cotton. They can't. It doesn't make for good production of cotton in Virginia. What happens is Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and I hate to use the term, but I can't think of a better one, becomes the breeding ground for slaveries further south. It's got to expand somehow. Long since the Constitution kind of banned the importation of slaves. So nobody's bringing in slaves from the Caribbean or Africa. That's over. That's gone. All the growth is internal. What you have is you had slave traders going around. Guys with literally a chain gang. Bunch of one or two guys with a whole line of slaves chained together, walking them around and asking, knocking on a plantation door and saying, hey, are you interested in a new slave? Or do you have any to sell? They will start in Virginia and they will work their way south, going down to South Carolina, Mississippi. Sometimes we see some of the traders marching from Virginia all the way to Louisiana. If you don't know, that's a heck of a long way. Okay, so we're going to see this, and we're going to see this kind of trade going back and forth. This is something we don't think about. We forget about where these slaves come from. We forget that slave owners are intentionally trying to encourage their slaves to have children because of the profit factor in it. Okay. The interesting thing, we always also think that slavery is done on an auction block, right? To get a slave, you go and there's an auction block and they auction them off. That's true, but it turns out, especially in the Deep South, maybe 30% of slaves went this way. Most of them were actually in what was called slave pens. Think of it as a car showroom. And you have to think of it as a car showroom because these people were property. They were not people. They were human, but they were kind of subhuman. At best, it's a piece of livestock. So when you went into the slave pen, you did what you do with a car. You kicked the tires. You checked the teeth because you can tell how healthy they are from the teeth, just like checking under the hood. You literally would kick them in the shin. That's a very common technique. You kick them in the shin. If they kind of wobble or whatever, they're weak. They're sick or they're weak, and that's not something you want to buy. It's a good way of testing. The amazing thing about these slave pens, some people have done some really great studies recently, is that in these slave pens, the slave actually has a bit of power by the way they hold themselves. Whether it's proud, whether it's tough, whether it's mean, they couldn't outright act. But just your persona and who you are and how you look, how you hold yourself, gives the impression that maybe you're somebody you want to take home, or maybe you're somebody who would cause trouble. So what's amazing is how much control we see some of these slaves having, and in fact choosing their owners, to choose the kinder owners. These are just a couple things to think about with the slave trade. A couple things you may not have thought about. The morality of it, we'll talk about that in discussion.